Rosa DeLaura, the gentlelady from Connecticut, for any opening remarks that she may have. Ms. DeLaura, you are now recognized.
Thank you so much,
The floor is
Mr.
yours.
Chairman. And thank you very, very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to Acting Ranking Member Harris for holding what is a very important hearing. And I want to say a thank you to you, Commissioner Califf, for testifying this morning. We are dealing with an infant formula emergency in this nation, a crisis of both safety and supply. I sounded the alarm on this crisis and have been working on this issue since news of the recall broke in February. I am glad that you are testifying before us today because we need to get to the bottom of the disgraceful lack of oversight and the terrible safety issues from an Abbott nutrition manufacturing plant that led to at least 2 babies dying and several others being hospitalized after consuming Abbott's infant formula. We need also to get to the bottom of FDA's slow response, which contributed to products staying on the shelves and in the homes of families the country over, potentially putting babies at risk and forcing parents to play a game of Russian roulette that they did not know they were playing. I want to say a thank you to Chairman Bishop for holding this hearing and for your long-time leadership on this subcommittee. In September 2021, FDA inspectors conducted a routine inspection of the Abbott Laboratories facility in Sturgis, Michigan, where suspicions of wrongdoing were already present, as noted in a Bloomberg article published May 12th from a reporter who obtained the FDA report through a Freedom of Information Act request. On October 20th, 2021, a whistleblower who worked at that Abbott facility submitted a report to the FDA unveiling a damning list of allegations of wrongdoing at the hands of Abbott. Recalls happen, but if the allegations are true, the company has lied, cut corners, falsified records to cover up their misdoings at the risk of infant health, and retaliated against employees who tried to correct the problems they were seeing. They knowingly put a contaminated product on the market. That is plain wrong. The FDA knew about what Abbott was doing in October, but it was not until late December that the FDA interviewed the whistleblower. And then, not until a month after that, in late January, was the plant inspected in person. Abbott then issued the recall in February, some 4 months later. In March, I requested an HHS Office of the Inspector General to report looking into the tragedy. And then I got hold and submitted for the record the whistleblower report with the truly awful allegations against Abbott. Their wrongdoings include the falsification of records, the testing seals on empty cans, releasing untested infant formula, just to name a few. It all begs the question, why did the FDA not spring into action? Why did it take 4 months to pull this formula off the store shelves? How many more illnesses and deaths were caused due to the FDA's slow response? Who received the report at the end? At the FDA. What did they do with the report? Who in the leadership had access to that report? Who didn't have access to that report? And why was there no reaction? It makes me question which side the FDA is on. Are they on the side of Abbott and industry, or on the side of the American consumer? In this case, babies and their moms and dads. We must get to the bottom of the food safety issue. But today, we are dealing with a serious infant formula shortage in this country, where parents, many of whom are struggling, are now scrambling to find the formula to feed their babies. The shortage was caused in large part by the lack of action by the FDA and by corporate greed and consolidation. In this case, Abbott putting profits in production over people. This should not happen in the wealthiest nation in the world. And there are 2 parts of this shortage, safety and supply. And we cannot and should not have to choose between the 2. And I reject this dangerous and this false dichotomy. President Biden just announced that he will be invoking the Defense Production Act to increase domestic production of infant formula and launching Operation Fly Formula to use federal planes to fly formula in from abroad. I have been calling for the swift importation of safe infant formula from FDA-approved facilities overseas. That is the direction we need to go in. That's what I hope is being planned. These steps can help us to achieve the goal, and I applaud the first steps. This week, and we passed last evening, a bill to deal with a portion of this effort. Last night, we voted on a bill to provide $28 million in new funding for the FDA to address the shortage, to prevent fraudulent products from entering the marketplace, and to help acquire better data on the situation in the marketplace. To prevent shortages from happening again, we will work to strengthen the workforce focused on formula issues and increase FDA's inspection staff. But as the ranking member has pointed out, funding is not the only answer. This issue goes beyond funding, and that has to do with a structural problem. And for another time, I would want to discuss the need for a deputy commissioner for foods with accountability to the commissioner and have direct line authority over the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, the Center for Veterinary Medicine, and food-related components and operations of the Office of Regulatory Affairs. This should happen immediately, and the person who is appointed needs to have relevant and appropriate food credentials. Someone with that background who understands this issue. I understand the FDA has begun to take action to address this shortage, which is encouraging. I remain concerned about the safety of the formulas that end up on our shelves. And as I have said, we cannot be forced to make a false choice between safety and supply. I'm disappointed that the FDA's recently released guidance does not go far enough to ensure formula is safe for our babies, because the food we feed our babies must be the safest product on the market, which is why I want to focus on FDA-approved facilities, because we have a standard that may not have been applied to Abbott, but we have a standard. When people grab a container of infant formula from the shelves, I want them to know that they do not have to play a guessing game. I want them to know that they can have confidence that it is safe. Commissioner Califf, I hope that you have been able to reflect on what went wrong, and with that come with answers, because we are all waiting for them. We need to get to the bottom of this terrible tragedy to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. And I thank you so much, Chairman Bishop and Acting Ranking Member Harris, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Delora, and thank you for your passion and compassion on this issue. It appears that Ranking Member Granger has not yet entered the meeting, and so with that, Dr. Califf, without objection, we will recognize you for your testimony. Your entire written testimony will be included in the record, but I hope that you will give a somewhat abbreviated statement so that we can proceed with questions. I'm sure that members have a number of questions for you, and we would like to expedite the hearing as much as possible. So at this time, Dr. Califf, you are recognized for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll go quickly here because I certainly understand your request. Chairman Bishop, Ranking Member Harris, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. First, let me thank the subcommittee for your continued support of FDA, particularly over the last 2 years as the agency has worked tirelessly to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and other challenges facing the agency, including the recent stress on the infant formula supply chain. Before discussing FDA's fiscal year 23 budget request, I want to discuss the current events around infant formula and reiterate FDA's firm commitment to ensuring that parents and caregivers have access to safe and nutritious infant formula. As a parent and grandparent, I recognize that many parents and caregivers have been unable to access the infant formula and critical medical foods that they need, and they are understandably frustrated and anxious. My daughter spent a month in an intensive care unit as an infant, and the memories are certainly still with me. The United States was facing infant formula supply chain stress even before the Abbott nutrition recall that began in February. The pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and labor supply issues have all had an impact, and I can assure you FDA has been working tirelessly to address this issue. This week, we've set up a mechanism that streamlines the ability for companies that do not normally sell infant formula in this country to do so, and provides other flexibilities to domestic distributors who can help increase availability. I want to be clear. Under this process, an infant formula would only be imported after the agency reviews the product and determines the product is safe and provides adequate nutrition. Safety is paramount. In addition, a consent decree of permanent injunction was entered between the FDA and Abbott Nutrition. Under the consent decree, Abbott has agreed to take actions overseen by FDA and independent experts that will result in an increase of infant formula products and ensure safe powdered infant formula is produced at the facility. As you also know, yesterday the President invoked the Defense Production Act to ensure that manufacturers have the necessary ingredients to make safe, healthy infant formula here at home and announced Operation Fly Formula to speed up the import of infant formula to stores as soon as possible. Again, we know many parents and caregivers are feeling frustrated. With these three recent actions, we anticipate that additional products can quickly hit U.S. stores. We have a critical opportunity here to invest in FDA's ability to work with partners to ensure a safe, adequate supply of infant formula and metabolic formulas for the millions of infants who rely on them for their sole source of nutrition. Approximately 3.5 million infants are born annually in the United States, and yet CFSAN has funding for only 13 staff members to ensure the safety and adequate nutrition of these products. We also have no authority or dedicated resources to monitor and respond to supply chain disruptions. This crisis has shown us the impact of having a single manufacturer cease production for a brief period. And unless we strengthen the resilience of our supply chain, we could be one natural disaster, quality mishap, or cyber attack from being here again. I hope I can work with this committee to ensure we have the tools and resources we need moving forward. While expressions of empathy are important, I know that parents want formula on the shelves for healthy infants and in the hands of pediatricians for infants with special metabolic problems. Since the American public is our customer, I urge you when considering the budget to give our public funding for technology and experts at least as good as businesses we regulate. No modern company or health system would make such major decisions without a robust data and analytical system and dedicated expert analysts to do the work. Our budget request will help build a foundation for FDA to ultimately enable the agency to meet the growing needs and mandates upon which the public depends. While there are many critical priorities in our budget proposal, I'd like to mention three specific funding needs that do not get enough public attention: data and technology modernization, people and infrastructure. The technology and data systems that we have are not of the quality we need for us to fully facilitate innovation in the rapidly moving industry we regulate in order to protect the public from well-meaning or intentionally harmful products. Final thought here. When we review the infant formula situation, we will certainly find specific issues where we could have done better. And we will, of course, take accountability for any shortcomings. But unless we make the right investments in our infrastructure, including technology, data, people, and a modernized supply chain system, we will continue to see shortages and problems across the industries we regulate. Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. At this time, we will begin our questions, and I will begin. Commissioner, there will be a lot of questions about the infant formula crisis today, but I want to lead with the most basic question, and the subcommittee wants a real answer. It is unconscionable that it took 4 months from the time the first infant illness was reported before FDA sent inspectors to the plant. Why was that? Can you walk us through the process going forward on how you get the Abbott plant in Sturgis, Michigan back online? The president has invoked the Defense Production Act to address the formula shortage, and we'll purchase formula under that from other countries and have them flown into the U.S. to restock our shelves. And that we expect to be done quickly. But this is a temporary action. What is the FDA going to be doing to assure that this product is safe? As the chair lady has pointed out, not only do we need supply, but we need safety. Would you address that?
Sure. First of all, the question of what happened. I think Chairman DeLauro, I think correctly stated the timeframes. The dates are well known. The information is in the public. We have an ongoing investigation about the details of exactly what happened, from point A to point B along the way. And since it is ongoing, I can't give extensively more details on that part of it. I will comment directly on the issue of bringing the Sturgis plant back up. And I think the issues that you all have raised in your opening comments really exemplify the problem that we face when we have a concentrated industry where taking down one plant has such an enormous impact. This creates a situation where we have a delicate balance. If conditions are unsafe, how do we get the plant back up and operating without interrupting the supply? Remembering that this particular plant not only makes general infant formula, but is the largest supplier of this special metabolic formula for about 3,000 infants in our country who are totally dependent on very specialized formula that no one else makes. And so we had to really wrestle this to the ground with Abbott, ending up in a consent decree with the Justice Department to make sure that as we bring the plant up, both the FDA inspectorate and external experts are watching every step of the way. And I'm pleased to say today we've already made significant progress. And I think we are on track to get open within the next week to 2 weeks, most likely at the outer bound 2 weeks. But we're monitoring.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't want to, I hate to interrupt you, but I wanted to get to another question quickly. My time is going to expire. We've moved to 4 minutes. Of course, you heard reference to the political story indicating a quote that current and former officials use the terms ridiculous, impossible, broken, Byzantine, and a joke to describe the state of food regulation at FDA. And there are questions about the leadership problem. What can we expect to see? You announced last night that you plan to leverage the principal deputy commissioner expertise to provide strategic counsel, including the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition and Office of Regulatory Affairs. What can we expect from this action to improve the operations? And what is your reaction to Chair DeLauro's suggestion for restructuring the center?
Thank you for raising those questions. I learned in 2016 that the food side of the FDA was under-resourced consistently, very much so compared to the medical products side of the FDA. We'll make sure you're supplied with the comparative information. It's very important that we have the proper hiring authority and are able to pay the salaries of scientists. But you're also raising the question of leadership. I will mention that many of the most critical people were in positions of leadership in the past. And so they're certainly in a place to know. This is not a surprise. As I was considering coming back to the FDA, many of them called me. So I think there is, I was very well aware coming in that we need to do major improvements on the food side of the FDA, not because the people are bad, but there is a need for consistent leadership and the right resources for people to get their work done. What Dr. Woodcock brings
Mr. Commissioner, you have an opportunity, I think, to elaborate on that. My time has expired, and I want to give the opportunity to the other committee members to engage in questions because we are pushed for time this morning. So I'd like to yield to Dr. Harris, the distinguished ranking member, for his questions. And we have reduced the question time to 4 minutes because of the exigencies of our time this morning. You now recognize Dr. Harris for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Califf, on Monday, the FDA issued enforcement discretion guidance to help increase the supply of formula, including formulas being imported. Under that guidance, could we be importing infant formula from China?
It's not our primary intent to be bringing in formula from China, and it's not our first call. That's not excluded under the guidance, but we know a number of the facilities around the world that we can use where we have experience already, as Chairman DeLauro already pointed out.
Okay, thank you. No, my concern is just that, during COVID, we haven't done many, as many inspections overseas, and now we're going to be bringing in things from overseas where perhaps the inspections over the past few years have not been as rigorous. Now, a lot has been said that that the Chronobacter cases came from the Abbott plant, but am I correct that the CDC concluded its investigation with no findings of a definitive link between the Abbott formulas and the 4 cases, based on their genetic analysis of the Chronobacter?
I do appreciate your question, and this is very complicated, so we'll have to get back to you about the details, but the short side of it is, using genotyping, we could not connect the cases directly to the Abbott plant. That is correct, but the investigation is not over because Chronobacter is a very difficult organism to culture. And we do have 5 cultures that are positive for different types of Chronobacter from the Abbott plant. They just don't match up. And so the plant definitely needed to be dealt with. Saying that cases came directly from that plant is something that we can't say until the investigation is entirely completed.
Well, thank you. That was my concern, because I think Ms. Psaki in the White House actually said that infants died from that plant, and I think that just to correct the science, that link has not been definitive. It happened, but not scientifically proven. Finally, discussed emergency use authorization. Ventilator, had pneumonia, that under emergency use authorization. And I would just urge and ask, is this a concern to the FDA? Because I know, as we've talked about this, the regulation is pretty clear, and the statute's clear. May be effective should be the guideline for when an EUA can be issued, when nothing else is available. And as you know, there are studies being done, phase 3 trials on late stage therapies. Obviously, they may be effective. They're in stage 3, phase 3 trials. They are, and there is no other treatment. So could you briefly address what the FDA is doing to make sure that this fall, if we get a resurgence of COVID, we actually have an emergency use authorized or approved drug for treatment?
2 quick comments on that. Number 1, we do have treatments that are effective. They're not curative for that stage, that have a benefit. Steroids, baricitinib being 2 in particular, but we'll get you more details on those. We are always looking for more effective treatments and welcome anyone who can bring data indicating they have an effective treatment, and we'll act on it as quickly as we possibly can, which I think has been very quickly in the past. We'll continue to do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. At this time, I'm delighted to yield to the chairlady of the full committee, the gentlelady from Connecticut, who has been so vigilant in monitoring this issue and bringing it to public attention. So at this time, I yield to Chairwoman Rosa DeLauro for your questions.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of very quick facts. The fact is that the FDA food safety is not a priority. In fact, they just it needs to be a restructuring of the food safety with people who know food safety. I also might add that Dr. Woodcock was the acting commissioner when this October whistleblower report reached the agency. A fact about bacteria, it changes. I'm not a doctor. It mutates over time. It thrives in the kind of dry powder that formula is made up of, and it could have changed over time. My question is the following. Dr. Califf, have you read the whistleblower report?
I have, yes, I have looked at it, yes.
Okay, let me just say, what was the allegation that concerns you the most?
I'd say the most concerning, let me just point out that in my career, I've frequently been in the position of being the person in charge when whistleblower complaints are raised in an organization. The most concerning charge is that the integrity of the organization was compromised. So Once that integrity is compromised, then the question is, how can you trust any of the systems that are in place?
Mhm. Well, in fact, and yet, whomever looked at that report felt that there was no need to respond at all from October to February until there was a recall. That is a dereliction of duty, in my view. And in addition to which, you have the person who was the acting commissioner should have done that. Now it would appear that that person is going to oversee this effort. That is the fox in the hen house. If I can, let me ask you this issue. In the guidance that you put forward, you list recommended, but not required information from the manufacturers, and the manufacturers are most likely are not FDA approved. You have 7 FDA approved facilities, which you could go to immediately. But what you're talking about in the guidance is that you list recommendations that are not required to be followed. And so in fact, they do not even have to include those your recommendations in their application for certification and for review. Will you commit to not exercising enforcement discretion with respect to critical statutory and regulatory safety requirements?
Yes, with an emphasis on those critical requirements. We will not let infant formula into the U.S. It is not safe.
Well, but these folks do not have to abide by your recommendations. It is a guidance. Nothing is required of these potential manufacturers. Nothing.
With due respect, Madam Chairwoman, you're correct in what you say, except that we have the authority to either let the product in or not. So we have control over that.
Well, if you've got somebody who certifies, and you also talk in your guidance that people and efforts can self-certify or have a third party certify, so that you in fact do not have the tangible evidence from these facilities that in fact their product is safe to be imported, that baby formula is safe. I just want you to commit to the safety portion of this effort, and you don't have in place a mechanism that would guarantee the safety right now. You just don't. That guidance does not allow you to determine and to define the safety of the products that may be coming from facilities that are not FDA approved. And why aren't we going to facilities that are FDA approved and not allowing all these other potential manufacturers to enter into our system with the potential of creating another crisis of things? Guidance is not standardized. You have no guidance standardized across applications. It's you pick and you choose. If you don't have standards and they go across the board, you don't have a standard application process in which you can judge your product. I apologize to you, Mr. Chairman, for going over.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Laura. Hopefully we'll be able to come back and follow up. At this time, I'd like to recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Valadeo, for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Califf, thank you for coming to testify in front of the subcommittee today. This hearing is obviously very timely at this shortage is an emergency and has been for way too long. I believe all of us here on the committee are hearing from our constituents about the dire infant formula situation. Between the infant formula recall, subsequent plant shutdown, ongoing supply chain disruptions, and people panic buying out of fear that they won't be able to feed their babies, this has become a dangerous and unacceptable situation. Low income and disadvantaged communities like many in my district are suffering from consequences of the recall that started 3 months ago, or closer to 4 months ago. These families have been suffering through the COVID-19 pandemic, ongoing supply chain issues, inflation, and more, and they need a break. This administration appears interested in alleviating the issue, but it's taken too long to get to this point. We must ensure the shortage is fixed immediately. As you well know, especially on this committee, recalls of products in our country is not a new thing. And when it comes to this something as vital as the children's food supply, it seems the FDA just did not take this one as seriously as they should have. This isn't about purchasing a popular, trendy type of infant formula. This is about a critical access to specific formulas parents and caregivers need for their babies. Even one of my own children was relying on a very specific type of formula. So as a father who has had the opportunity or been in a situation where I had to drive all over town to chase specific formulas, and this was far before any shortage, I could only imagine the stress these parents are experiencing. Did the FDA treat this just like every other or any other recall that they've had to deal with, or did they understand the gravity of the situation from the beginning? More importantly, do they now fully grasp how devastating this entire situation has been and continues to be?
Well, first of all, I thank you for raising the specific issues of concern. From day one, when we saw the problems with the Abbott plant, we knew that this was a critical plant for the supply chain, and the team was meeting on a very regular basis, trying to figure out how to manage the situation, hoping to keep the plant open with better quality measures. And then it became clear that was not going to work, and we had a period of time of having to reach a consent decree, which is a complicated legal proceeding. But as I've indicated, we're all very aware. Many of us are parents or grandparents. Many of us have relatives that are in the same situation. We're hearing from everyone, so we're very focused.
All right, I appreciate that. And we're limited on time, obviously. So I hope that you understand that this is something that is having a huge impact, and obviously people all over the country are struggling with this. We're here in 2 weeks, and I know that the chairwoman had mentioned that that we want to see this open. I'd like to know what the FDA is doing on the ground at the Abbott plant in Michigan to help this situation as much as they possibly can. Are they working with them? Are folks on the ground as we speak right now making sure that we can get this facility up and running?
We're working with Abbott every day, and I'm getting a report twice a day, in the morning and the evening, about the progress that's being made. I mean, recognize we're just on day 3 now, but it looks like it is going well, that Abbott has remediated a number of the issues, and we're going to make sure it gets done as quickly as it possibly can.
All right. Now, I understand you've announced the principal deputy commissioner, and I think it was mentioned earlier in one of the statements, Dr. Woodcock will have a greater role in the strategic council over the food side of the FDA. And I know she has tremendous expertise on the drug side, but I'm hearing some concern about whether this decision will lead to a change that is needed on the food side, especially when she's been in the FDA for decades. Can you help me understand the rationale in this decision?
Sure. I would say this is just the start of a change. As I mentioned earlier, I knew coming in that we're going to need to make major fortification of the food side of the FDA with a focus on the things that you all have brought up. Dr. Woodcock knows every nook and cranny of the FDA. She knows how the operations work. She already had information technology redesign underway, which is critically needed. If you think about our inspectors out there, comparing the technology they have compared to what I saw in my previous job at Alphabet, it's night and day, and we have to fix that so that they can be efficient. But this is just the start of a change. She is not going to be permanently in the job. It still reports to me, and we will make further changes that you'll hear about over the next period of time.
All right, I appreciate it. My time is up. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Valadeo. At this time, I'm delighted to recognize the gentlelady from Maine, Ms. Pingree. You are now recognized for your questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for having this critical hearing at this moment in time. And thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for being with us today and answering our questions. I just want to associate myself with the questions that have already been asked by Chair Bishop, Chair DeLauro, Mr. Valadeo, really on both sides of the aisle. Obviously, this is a very troubling situation. And I'm not going to repeat all the same questions. I just want to say that I am concerned, Mr. Commissioner, that you aren't providing us with more detailed information. I think we have to dig deeper into this troubling pattern of leadership challenges and structural issues. on food safety at the FDA. This isn't new, and we have to work on this. And this is a huge crisis for America, and I'm very, very concerned about where we are. I'm just going to pivot because, like I said, I feel really grateful that my colleagues have been asking good questions, and I know others will be asking more as well. I just want to talk a little bit about vaccine access for children. I really appreciate that the FDA has done some challenging, essential work over the last 2 years on COVID, particularly in the vaccine space. One key group with no authorized COVID vaccines are children 5 and under. I totally understand and appreciate how important it is to evaluate safety and efficacy. That's a huge concern in America. But I'm hearing all the time from parents and caregivers in Maine and also around the country who are just really frustrated and feeling left behind. Any further delays that continue, these children will enter yet another school year unvaccinated. Can you commit to us that reviewing any potential authorization for a vaccine covering children under 5 will happen as quickly as possible? And what timeline can we reasonably expect and tell people you will follow once an application is received?
Yeah, I'll answer quickly. I've been involved in children's therapeutics my whole career. And one of the major lessons is that children are not just small adults. And so you have to do specific studies for the biology and the size and mechanics of how children dispose of therapeutic interventions. Having said that, we now have the Moderna application in hand, as you know. As soon as we're ready, which is imminent, we have a number of dates reserved for the advisory committee meeting. So as soon as we're ready, we'll have that meeting and have the advisory committee weigh in on whether the safety and efficacy are adequate. And there are others. The Pfizer application should be coming in sometime soon also. So I'm definitely committed as quickly as possible. I have 2 grandchildren under age 5, so I'm very much in the same boat that's being described.
So there was some talk for a while that that the FDA would wait till the Pfizer application was in, which seems really unthinkable, not to move forward as quickly as possible, but just for some level of efficiency, or I don't know what the rationale was. Can you commit that that is not going to happen?
That there is no delay in the Moderna application because of another application. Each one will be considered on its own. And I don't need to tell you that sometimes discussions that are held as you're developing a strategy get touted as if that's a decision that's actually been made. That was never the case. And I want to refute that from the beginning.
Well, thank you for setting that straight and for moving with all appropriate speed. Obviously, that's a critical age group, and those are, they have different, bodies and, needs. So I do want to be as safe as possible, but, congratulations to you on having 2 grandchildren under 5. I have 4 grandchildren under 5. And, again, we hear this from mothers and caregivers all the time. So thank you for the work that you've been doing. And really, please continue this conversation about food safety and the huge difficulties that people are having today. That's really very important to the oversight of this committee. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Pingree. I now recognize Mr. Molinar of Michigan. You are now recognized for your questions, Mr. Molinar. Oops. Please unmute, Mr. Molinar. Mr. Molinar, I believe that you are still muted. We'll move to Mr. Newhouse and see if we can't get you a technology, get you and come back to you. So this time I recognize Mr. Newhouse and we will come back to Mr. Molinar at the earliest convenience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully the clock will reset, but appreciate the opportunity. Dr. Califf, thank you for being here with us. I won't repeat what others have said, just to associate myself with much of the concern that's been expressed. I would like to ask you about the money that was just appropriated. I would like to know how, in your estimation, an additional $28 million assures parents that imported formula will be safe for their children, how it's going to help replenish the inventory in grocery stores in a timely manner. Did you request this additional funding, especially in light of the fact that just a couple months ago, we increased the FDA budget by over $100 million, $11 million of that specifically for maternal and infant health and nutrition activities. So could you shed some light on some of the money situation for us?
Sure, I appreciate the question. I think Chairwoman DeLauro made the case very strongly that safety has to be paramount. So the bulk of that money would go for inspectors to make sure that material is not being put on the shelves, which is unsafe, which is a very laborious effort right now, particularly given our information technology deficits that I've mentioned. We also need the in-house expertise to evaluate these applications as we try to diversify the supply chain. And overseeing the Abbott plant takes a whole number of people to make sure every single aspect of that is being done correctly. And then, as I've already mentioned, the underlying information technology is critical here. American business or healthcare systems would not depend on the kind of information technology we have to make these kind of decisions, and we need to do something about it, in my opinion. And let me just also mention, you mentioned the other maternal fetal issues. This is not the only one. We have toxins in infant and baby food. We just had a guidance on apple juice, for example. This takes very high quality scientists to do the analyses, collect the data to figure out how quickly we can bring these levels closer to zero, just as one example. And then many members have been concerned about recommendations on seafood. I could go on and on. These things are all critical to our most vulnerable people, our children and their mothers. So they all need to be a priority.
No doubt. I totally agree. Did you request the additional funding?
Yes.
Well, we're going to have a lot. Like I said, I associate myself with a lot of the comments made. I'd like to shift gears, if I could, to another topic. Since the legalization of hemp and hemp products was made several years ago, I believe we're still waiting on FDA for some action to be taken, and currently the industry is in a state of uncertainty because of no direction. Could you provide an update on FDA's comprehensive sampling of CBD products that was discussed in July of 2020, a report on mislabeling, specifically the long-term plan that you may have and what you have found to date?
I really appreciate that question and the amazing plethora of derivatives of the cannabis plant. It's really quite profound and astounding, and already in widespread use for a variety of means, as you know. Most of the FDA effort so far has been spent on research to figure out what the risks, if any, are of various uses of this material in its different forms. We are committed. I just want to tell you, 2016, I worked on this. Coming back in 2022, it looks pretty much the same in terms of where we are. We just know more now because we've done more research. I am very committed to taking a path on this, and just to put a marker down, I don't think the current authorities we have on the food side, the drug side, necessarily give us what we need to have to get the right pathways forward. We're going to have to come up with something new, and very committed to do that.
I appreciate hearing that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm afraid the gentleman's time has expired. Let me recognize Mr. Pokane, and following Mr. Pokane, we'll go back to Mr. Molinar.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Califf. I really have appreciated the previous conversations we've had. Please take this in the proper vein, but I think there was frustration when you were asked what happened, and the answer you gave back is, we're investigating, I can't talk about it. You can talk about it, and honestly, you should talk about it. One problem that I've seen over and over with the FDA in my 10 years here is you guys aren't good at communicating. And, this is something that parents are asking us about. They want to know what happened. You all got to get that down to explaining in a way that real people can understand. I understand there's science behind it, but it's not acceptable to say that you can't comment on it. Just putting that out there. The public wants to know more. We've got to do that. I also share in all the questions that people have asked in this area, as well as Representative Pingree's questions around the vaccine. We're getting asked that for children under 5. When's that going to be available? Let me go to a couple different subjects. CBD, while CBD is widely used in a number of products, as you just had the conversation, Mr. Newhouse, technically CBD's sale in the eyes of the FDA is illegal. What is FDA's plan to clarify that CBD could possibly be regulated as a food or a food additive, and is there any timeline?
The research so far has shown that there are some risks with CBD. And so we're going to need a different pathway than just the standard food pathway. I've told you, and I really mean it, I'm committed to do something about this, and it's going to take some work. I hope that you'll work with me on that, because it's going to take some creativity. When you come back 6 years later to the job you had before and nothing has really changed, that's telling you that you can't just keep trying to do the same thing over and over.
Yeah, this is a frustration. I'll be honest, I've had with FDA also on Kratom. You and I have had that conversation where, as you may know, Senator Lee and I sent you sent a letter to actually Secretary Becerra in March of this year, bipartisan letter. The Secretary acknowledged that there's emerging science that contradicts the previous positions of the FDA on Kratom's safety profile, and yet you recently put more alerts on import alerts on companies that are doing a legal proper way of handling kratom coming to the country versus the companies that aren't. And the real question is there a way to try to lift that import restriction on those companies that have followed all the rules? I believe the technical language is a structure function claim versus the others, because right now it's kind of hitting everyone with one FDA order on what I think is an extremely antiquated position that the FDA has on kratom. As you know, you and I have talked about this, NIDA is in a very different place than you are on kratom.
Well, I do look forward to coming back to you, hopefully in a couple of months, with very specific suggestions on what to do. There are millions of people using kratom. We do have real adverse events, though. I mean, real negative things that have happened to people, and it does interact with multiple neurotransmitters. NIDA is doing a lot of research. I'm very good friends with Nora Volkow, the head of NIDA. We'll continue to work with NIDA, and we'll go where the science tells us to go. But like I said, with regard to cannabis products, we need something different for these kinds of products that are not traditional foods, not traditional drugs.
I can reclaim, just because I have 28 seconds. Also, you recently updated the fact sheet on kratom on April 27th with only minor modifications. And honestly, there's not only arguable conclusions, but you're linking to outdated, incomplete, and inaccurate information. Again, in this letter, Secretary Becerra seems to have a bit of a different position. If you could just look at that update was not much of an update, and I think it's being very unfair to the consumers who are legally using kratom in this country. And I'll yield back.
Definitely look at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Mr. Bishop, I believe you're on mute.
Can you hear me? Okay, Mr. Molinar, you are now recognized. I hope your technical difficulties have been resolved.
no.
I'm afraid we cannot hear you, Mr. Molinar. Is there any way that we can? Okay, with that, we'll try to come back to you, Mr. Molinar. Ms. Letlow? Ms. Letlow, you are now recognized. Welcome to the committee, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Bishop, Dr. Harris, and members of the subcommittee. I'm honored to join this distinguished committee and to have the opportunity to represent the priorities of the 5th Congressional District of Louisiana and the communities throughout the Delta region. As the newest member of this subcommittee, I'm particularly eager to work with my colleagues in advocating on behalf of our farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners. Agriculture is the backbone in my district and is one of the largest economic forces in the area. Dr. Califf, as a mother of a 4 and a 2-year-old, it was not long ago that I was completely dependent on infant formula to fulfill my children's nutritional needs. I can only imagine the terror parents across this country are feeling as they desperately search for formula to keep their children alive, quite literally, with some parents forced to admit their children to the hospital when no formula can be found. This shortage impacts parents and healthcare providers nationwide. It's at the forefront of everyone's mind today, but for my district, it's incredibly important that we work in an expeditious fashion to increase access to safe formula options because I represent a heavily rural district. It makes up close to 20% of the Louisiana population and covers the largest geographic area with a diverse economic base. I say all of this to paint a picture of what family space in urban areas is likely exacerbated in rural America, where proximity to retailers and availability of certain goods could be a 30-minute drive to the nearest real retailer. Dr. Califf, as I'm sure you are aware, there are specialty metabolic formulas that only Abbott produced, which are necessary formulas for many families. With the forced closure of the Abbott facility, did FDA consider there was no one else that could step in to provide those specialty formulas? And at any point, did FDA become concerned about a lack of supply in the days prior or following the closure of this plant?
Let me just, for everyone concerned, I do think it's useful to divide the formula into the general formula, as you all have astutely done in your questions, and the specialty metabolic formula, which deals with a much smaller but really critical group of infants who are totally dependent, not just on formula, but on the very exact makeup of the formula. So from the first day, we had a team of people, and we were in connection with the American Academy of Pediatrics to try to do everything we could to keep the formula coming from that Abbott plant, from their stores, and releasing on a lot-by-lot basis as needed, carefully weighing the safety and the critical need that these infants have. This system is not perfect, but the network of communication is still very much in play with the pediatric community, the hospital community, and our team at the FDA working together. It won't get better until we can rev up that plan again and also diversify. But I hope you also appreciate that because this formula, special metabolic formula, is very complicated, you can't just start up a plan and do it. It takes a lot of work to get a plant able to do it. So we've got to work with Abbott to make this work while we're also diversifying the supply.
Thank you, Dr. Califf. I want to get one more question in. Given the FDA's recent announcement on the new enforcement discretion guidance, how much formula do you expect will be imported, and what is the real timeline of seeing those products on our store shelves?
Well, the way we're thinking about it is we're pulling a bunch of levers at the same time. The other formula manufacturers in the U.S. have revved up their supply to 24/7. It's increased considerably. We're going to start up the Sturgis plant. We have the importation that you're referring to. And I think the combination of all three, we should begin to see improvement within days. And I do want to point out that right now, in the last week, we have had more infant formula bought by between 11 and 19% than what was bought in the month before the closure of the plant.
So I can tell my constituents that within a matter of days, they'll be able to find formula on the shelves?
It will gradually get better. The big problem we have right now is distribution, and I think you're very important what you called attention to. The worst problems are in the rural areas because they're not the major areas that are purchasing these goods, and we're going to have to pay very special attention to that. So within days, it will get better, but it will be a few weeks before we're back to normal.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Ludlow. At this time, I recognize the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Underwood. You're now recognized for 4 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Dr. Califf. FDA has recently announced several steps to get more formula onto shelves, including permitting Abbott Nutrition to release product from the Sturgis facility to people needing urgent supplies of certain specialty and metabolic formulas on a case-by-case basis. Dr. Califf, can you describe how your agency is communicating with healthcare professionals and with families about the risks and benefits of using specialty and metabolic formula products from the Sturgis facility so that parents can make informed decisions about safely accessing the products their infants need?
Thank you. And I know that you have a nursing background, so you have a very special feel for what's at stake here. As I just described, this specialty formula, this is general formula is hard enough. 30 constituents have to be there in just the right amount. Or we have a history in this country of disasters that have occurred when that doesn't happen. And so it does take very much hands-on evaluation step by step. There's a committee of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and in fact, the physician that was featured in the New York Times yesterday, I talked with him on the phone. He's the chair of the committee on this subject at the American Academy of Pediatrics. So we're working through the professional society on this.
Right.
And case by case, if families are having problems, we need to hear from them.
Okay, as we take action to immediately address infant formula shortages, we also need to comprehensively assess the causes of the current shortages so that this never happens again. A whistleblower report included numerous disturbing allegations about wrongdoing at the Sturgis plant, and it was, and it was especially troubling to learn that the report was submitted to FDA on October 20th of 2021, but FDA did not inspect the plant in person for more than 3 months. Within this time frame, on December 29th, 2021, FDA temporarily postponed some inspections due to the Omicron surge, but continued to conduct, quote, mission critical work. According to your agency's resiliency roadmap for FDA inspectional oversight, there are 4 factors for determining if a product meets a threshold for mission critical inspections. If it's received breakthrough designation, if it's used to treat a serious medical condition, if it's related to the agency's COVID-19 response, or if there's evidence of serious adverse events. So based on these criteria, would powdered infant formula at the Sturgis facility be considered a product that meets the threshold for mission critical inspections?
As I said in my opening statement, we'll find specific issues where we could have done better. You've just done a very good job of enumerating several of those, including this one. So I cannot disagree with your statement.
Okay, yeah, it's not optional for families. This is essential. So what steps will FDA take to ensure that inspections of infant formula manufacturing facilities continue to be carried out on a safe and timely basis during public health emergencies or any other period where the inspections are postponed?
Well, I've already assured you all that no matter what, we will be on top of this issue until we're back to normal, working around the clock day and night. It would sure help if we had a larger number of people, because as we diversify the facilities and we bring in new sources, as the chairwoman has already made the point quite distinctly, we're going to need people who can actually evaluate whether the formula is safe. Not only that, whether it's effective, especially in these metabolic formulas. There are only a handful of people that even understand the illnesses that these children have.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Underwood. We'll try Mr. Molinar again. You are now recognized, and hopefully we've got the technical difficulties resolved. You're now recognized, Mr. Molinar.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for continuing to call on me. I'm hoping I'm coming through.
You are.
All right. Dr. Califf, thank you for your testimony today. I know you've been getting a lot of questions on the baby formula shortage. I just wanted to share with you, I've been hearing from hundreds of Michigan families about how this formula shortage is affecting them or someone they know. And I just wanted to share a couple of stories with you and ask for how you as an agency can respond to them. A father in Manton, Michigan wrote, "My child has an allergy to milk, so she has to have a very specific formula. Now that formula is short, other babies that don't need the type of formula that is necessary for my daughter are allowed to purchase it through the WIC program, making her formula even more scarce. I've had to resort to getting formula from out of state and Canada at times. The shipping costs are a huge burden on my family, and it requires hours of research that I could be spending with my family. And a mother in Montcalm County wrote, I've had issues finding my son's formula since October of 2021. So I bought in bulk. Then everything I had on hand was recalled. I could get it at Target for a few weeks and they stopped having it. Even Amazon stopped getting it back in March of this year. I had to switch to a different kind of formula. I'm fortunate enough to be able to afford and buy multiple cans at a time. So when I found it at Costco, my mom, me, and my sister bought what I needed to get through 6 weeks. Now the kind my son is on isn't even in stock at Costco. I pray I have enough to get him to his first birthday. My friends have to search multiple stores to find the kind their baby is on. Another ends up changing formula each time she runs out because it's all she can find. We just can't breastfeed. Our babies rely on formula, and it's scary being a mother right now. I will also add a local grocery store owner also wrote me saying it is heart-wrenching to have to tell our customers that we have no baby formula to offer them. We are concerned that our local babies are not getting the nutrition they need. Nutrition in general is a very challenging problem in our rural area. Dr. Califf, what would you like to tell these parents who are concerned about just simply finding food for their babies?
I'll tell them that we are very concerned and feel badly that they're going through this, and we're doing everything we can to fix it. And if I could make a couple of quick points about things that you brought up. As I mentioned, the sales are actually higher than they were. The people are buying more formula now than before the recall. And so we have a problem of distribution. The FDA has no access right now into the supply chain data from the companies that manufacture and sell the formula. So a good bit of my week this week is getting on the phone with CEOs using an old-fashioned method called a telephone to try to get the right product to the right place in an organized way. We're requesting, again, that we have more authority to look at the supply chains, much like the banks did years ago, so that we can test and preempt these kinds of problems rather than having to react to them.
Well, thank you, Dr. Califf. Just a quick question, also changing gears a bit on standards of identity. The lack of enforcement of dairy standards is something I've raised with you and several of your predecessors. I'm hoping that the forthcoming guidance will move beyond the current practice of non-enforcement and require everyone to simply follow the law. A related issue I wanted to raise with you is the standard of identity for yogurt. And it's my understanding that the FDA recently updated this in June of 2021, but the industry actually does not support that.
Mr. Mulliner, I'm so sorry, but your time has expired.
Okay.
And I want to get to Ms. Wasserman Schultz of Florida. And following Ms. Wasserman Schultz, I will declare the subcommittee in recess, subject to the call of the chair following votes, immediately following votes. But Ms. Wasserman Schultz won't be able to return. So you're now recognized, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your indulgence. And I really want to say that everyone knows that the world's best oranges are grown in the great state of Florida. My good friends on this committee from California might disagree, but the truth is that Florida's climate has a distinct impact on how oranges are grown, making them comparatively sweeter and juicier than growers from other states. Unfortunately, though, pests, diseases, and more violent hurricanes are having a devastating impact on Florida's citrus growers and processors. These circumstances have resulted in a natural decline in the Brix level for Florida's mature oranges. In fact, for most of the last citrus season, Florida oranges did not meet the federal minimum standard of 10.5 degrees Brix. The Brix standard was adopted nearly 60 years ago in 1963, at a time when our understanding of climate change was minimal. And despite these natural changes to Brix levels, there are no known adverse health consequences for consumers. We need FDA to work directly with Florida citrus growers and processors to find a solution, which should include providing additional flexibility by modernizing requirements to account for the naturally occurring Brix variation. Failure to do so will result in the industry losing out on imports from Brazil and Mexico and worsening our trade deficit. Commissioner, what is FDA's current engagement on this issue, and are you committed to finding a solution to this problem in the immediate future?
I'm definitely committed to finding a solution. And your point, I think, exemplifies something we've been talking about. If you take changes in the climate, changes in the crops, human health, this is high science. And we need the people who can actually do the work to make the best judgments based on the data. It's not something you just make up. You actually need the data and you need analysis. So very much appreciate your interest in this.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well. And the other thing I wanted to focus on is something that I know you and I have talked about several times before. In Florida, for example, more than 25% of high school students use e-cigarettes, and more than 29,000 kids under 18 try cigarettes for the first time each year. Tobacco kills 32,300 people in my state every year, costing Florida about $8.64 billion in annual healthcare expenses, and the proportion of cancer deaths in Florida attributable to smoking is 29%. These are not just numbers. These are our friends and family, and devastatingly our children. I lost my own mother to lung cancer just a year ago. The FDA has the authority to address this serious public health problem. And I've been advocating for several years for FDA to consider rulemakings to prohibit menthol cigarettes and flavored cigars. And I'm thrilled that FDA initiated this process just a few weeks ago with proposed product standards. Can you provide the committee with an update on these proposed standards and the impact this would have on preventing children from falling victim to big tobacco?
Sure, and I'm a cardiologist. I spent many years, 3.5 decades, caring for people who were critically ill, many of them in the state of North Carolina due to tobacco-related illness. So I'm very sensitive to this topic. These standards are now out for public comment, and we're going to have several public meetings. And then we'll answer the comments, and then they'll be put into effect with modifications based on the comments that we do get. So we're encouraging people to come to the table, particularly the sensitive issue of, as the standards come into play, what do we do about local enforcement if there is illicit trade where this might be applied differentially. So we're very sensitive to that issue. The FDA is not involved in local enforcement, but we want to make sure through community engagement that people understand that we're going after the people manufacturing these products, not local citizens, but also make sure that local law enforcement and communities understand that.
Thank you so much. I only have a little bit of time left, not enough to ask another question. So I appreciate your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Wasserman-Schultz. The committee will now stand in recess subject to the call of the chair immediately following the votes, and we will reconvene. subcommittee is now called to order. We will resume, and I believe when we went into recess, I was about to recognize the gentlelady from New York, Miss Ming. So at this time, I'm delighted to recognize for questions, Ms. Ming, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Harris. It's good to be with all of you, and thank you for this opportunity. Dr. Califf, as you know, there are concerning reports about the presence of hazardous chemicals that are known by the EPA to be likely cancer-causing substances, as well as undisclosed fragrance chemicals that contain potential allergens in menstrual products. And given that these products are frequently used in highly absorptive parts of the body, the risk that fragrance ingredients could pose to health is grave. And just because an ingredient is not on the list of fragrance allergens does not mean that it will not have an impact on a woman's health. Wanted to ask what the FDA process looks like for fragrance ingredients to be listed as an allergen. And are there additional resources necessary for your scientists to continue advancing this research?
Thank you for your interest in this topic, which is complex. And I would say the first principle is I think all of us at FDA believe that whatever is in something that's sold to the public, it should be listed so that people know it's there, which, as you know, has been just that in itself. It's been a big challenge to get the authority to require that that's the case. Beyond that, in order to deal with this scientifically, we need to do an evaluation of the level of the constituent, what its effects are on the health of individuals and others who may come in contact with it. And we are therefore, supportive of working towards having the correct labeling and understanding the risks with all the factors involved. I think we've already heard quite a bit this morning about the resource issues that we have on this side of the FDA. And I just want to emphasize, this is not a simple matter of someone sort of guessing about what the levels are and what the risks are. This is a huge scientific issue requiring big data and computational skills to get the answer, and federal agencies working together. So appreciate your interest. We look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you, definitely. And I also wanted to ask about your Closer to Zero action plan to reduce exposure to metals in foods for babies and young children. I know that FDA missed its first deadline. It wasn't until mid-April that the FDA submitted its proposal to OMB for review. Wanted to ask what the FDA's revised schedule for the Closer to Zero action plan is, and what are plans for coordination with OMB?
Yes, first, just to acknowledge that we'd all like these levels to be zero. So that's why it's closer to zero. We have to bring these levels down at a rate which will enable the industry to adapt and get there. I think you're aware that the apple juice levels just came out. And for the kids who drink a lot of apple juice, this will be like over a 40% reduction in exposure for those kids. We do have several others that are in OMB. I met with the head of OMB last week to urge that we move as quickly as possible. And we're going to stay in touch and shepherd these through as quickly as we possibly can. Again, just like what I said about the fragrance issue, exactly where the level should be over time as we bring it down is a matter of scientific discussion and measurement, about which there are several opinions, and we need to get that resolved.
Thank you very much. And I'll yield back, but I just wanted to also associate myself with the comments of our chairman and many of our colleagues today about the infant formula shortage. I had one of my babies had to use EllaCare, one of the special formulas only produced by Abbott, and that was hard to find even during good times. So I really want to associate myself with the comments of my colleagues and please ask that you please communicate with us and our families across America so that we can be responsive with our efforts.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Chairman, just quickly mention AliCare is our main focus right now in the plant in Michigan, and I hope I think we're going to be moving very quickly on that. It is the #1 priority because it is essential. It's the largest population of this essential infant formula.
Thank you, Ms. Ming, and thank you, Mr. Commissioner. We have completed our first round of questions, and we will now begin the second round. But I continue to be disturbed by the length of time that it took for FDA to really start to address this problem. And secondly, of the non-specific and the vague way that the implementation of a plan to solve it. With the supply chain, with the inspections, with the safety, that's real concern. And I hope that before we close, that you can be a little bit more specific in terms of how that's going to happen. Let me go to the question of the foreign drug inspections. Over the last 2 years, we provided funding specifically to the FDA to increase unannounced foreign drug inspections in certain countries to ensure the safety of the drug supply. And the FDA's practice of announcing foreign inspections weeks in advance brings up the issue of parity with how we treat our domestic manufacturers and what kinds of issues could be covered up during a waiting period. Unfortunately, FDA used our 2021 funding to set up a test of announced versus unannounced inspections and not to restart the unannounced inspections, which was our intent. You know well the perils of drug manufacturing in certain countries. Can you give us your commitment that you will direct FDA to restart unannounced inspections as directed by Congress?
Yes, sir. Let me assure you that I've been the subject of inspection in universities and companies I work for clinical trials, biologics, and technology development. And I'm very well aware of the importance of having a certain amount of unannounced inspections. We appreciate the money that was allocated the first time around, I think about $8.5 million. And today I can say that we've started the unannounced inspection program in India. China will follow behind, but as you know, because of the COVID outbreak, it's difficult to get started in China. So the plan is to have hundreds of unannounced or short notice inspections that we'll be able to report back to you about.
Right. The infant formula crisis has focused attention on the fact that the infant formula office has a staff of only 9 people. The budget acknowledges that funding in our FY22 bill will add 4 people to the office, which is great. But I worry about how many other drastically understaffed offices there are at FDA that we don't know about. It seems we only learn about those staffing shortages when there's a crisis. This has been a concern for many years and over a number of administrations. So speaking for the subcommittee, we want to help ensure that all of FDA's operational units are properly staffed. What are the other understaffed parts of FDA that we should be concerned about that are not addressed in your budget request?
I would just say the entire food side of the FDA is understaffed in every category. That's why in the budget, we've asked for money to staff up and also to improve the authority for hiring and salaries, just like we have on the medical products side. This is absolutely essential. I certainly want to notice that I don't disagree with your statement that money alone won't fix it. But basically, I think you can see with infant formula, 9 people for something this important is just not enough. And we got money for 4 more, but in the current federal hiring authority, it takes months to bring someone on board. And we don't see that with the authority that we got with 21st Century Cures on the drug and device side. So I really want to implore you to help us get staffed up. And I take seriously your other part of it, that the money and people alone will not solve the problem. We also have to have leadership and structure.
My time has expired. Hopefully, the Senate will pass the supplemental quickly. Let me yield to Dr. Harris for a second round of questions. My ranking member, you are now recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Califf, I know that last fall the FDA released its final guidance on short-term sodium, voluntary short-term sodium reduction. Look, I understand that for some people, sodium is not a good thing, and reducing a dietary intake is probably warranted. For others, it may not make a difference. We don't know how to differentiate between those two right now. So I worry about a one-size-fits-all plan. But will the FDA conduct a study on the impact of the short-term targets to understand consumer acceptability and what impacts those reductions might have on public health?
Dr. Harris, I know you're an anesthesiologist and know a good bit about the topic of autoregulation. And so for sure, one size fits all is not the solution to the problem. But I also know you're aware that when in the voluntary levels, we're talking about super high levels that are built into food, just bringing it down to a level that would be more like what the average intake is for most people. And I think the data are very clear that super high levels are not good for anyone unless you have one of the strange diseases, by the way, post-COVID is part of a dysautonomia where you don't have enough constriction of your blood vessels to keep a blood pressure when you stand up. And so we will be evaluating the impact and the progress towards reduction. And I'm very excited, a focus of the administration across NIH and FDA and Department of Agriculture is going to be diet, what we eat. There's a big summit coming up at the White House, and I'm sure sodium will be a key part of it. Many people will weigh in on where we are and where other societies are with regard to sodium. So we need to keep an open mind about the right policy.
Okay, no, thank you very much. It's been touched on with regards to the infant formula, the problem of domestic manufacturing versus overseas manufacturing, but writ large, I think COVID has made us aware that we don't have enough domestic manufacturing of both pharmaceuticals and active pharmaceutical ingredients. How is your agency, and specifically this budget request, supporting more domestic manufacturing of pharmaceuticals and medical products so that we don't have this issue of do we have to depend upon foreign nations, sometimes unfriendly?
Well, I'd like to spend an hour talking with you about this, but in brief, because this is a big focus of ours, and I'm going to write a lot about it. You're going to see more about it. The two cases we have in front of us now are examples of why the two extremes are wrong. The infant formula crisis is happening in the face of complete domestic production. And you know about contrast media. If one of you were to, we've had some prominent politicians have strokes recently. One of the major suppliers of contrast media only had one factory in Shanghai that was making contrast media. And when that shut down because of COVID, now when people roll in with a stroke or heart attack, they may not be able to get an angiogram because you need contrast media. So we got these two extremes. What we need is a versatile supply chain built on a digital backbone so that we can keep track of where the products are and to stress test that supply chain. Now, in the budget is manufacturing in place, which I think is the most exciting technology part of it, and also platform manufacturing. It's in the budget. I know we have limited time, but I could talk a long time about this, as you can tell. We have to do something about this. The answer is not just onshoring. The answer is having a diversified system where we can prevent shortages occurring preemptively instead of waiting for them to happen.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. At this time, I yield for a second round to the chair of the committee, the gentlelady from Connecticut, Mr. Laurel.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Bishop. And just a quick follow-on to, I think, what Dr. Harris was speaking about, and also Dr. Califf. Our biggest problem here is the consolidation of the industry. We only have 4 sources in the United States that are manufacturing this product, and quite frankly, Abbott has cornered the market. 43% of it. So when they go out of sync, so underlying all of this, and not for today's conversation because it's a lengthy one, it's just we have to get out of the sole source contracting business, and we need to do this not only here but in the meatpacking industry as well. It has been said by Chairman Bishop, and I associate myself with his comments and also with the ranking member's comments. I understand you need resources, and I've worked to increase resources to the FDA, but your problems are structural. You have serious structural leadership issues. Someone in this agency needs to have serious, relevant, and food credentials, who understands it, because otherwise food safety will be a second-class citizen, continue to be a second-class citizen at the FDA. I want to just mention to you, a colleague earlier on, you can't hide behind an investigation. We need answers. We need them now. Who received this report? What did they do with it? Who was heading the FDA at that time? My understanding is that the acting commissioner was Janet Woodcock. What did she know about this? So who was handling all of this when this report went to the FDA and investigating all of this?
Well, as I've said, you've got the timeline down and you've got the key issues. I know we have an oversight hearing next week, and we'll be prepared to go into much more detail at that point. And, you know, as I've said, we could do better than we did.
But you have an oversight committee next week. You're before the committee that funds what you do.
Yeah.
So this information is relevant to this subcommittee of appropriations.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, that the investigation is not completed yet, and so I'm not in a position to answer specifics like that.
So you have no idea who received the document?
Well, we do know.
At the agency. Who physically received the document? Where did it go? Who read it? What was the chain of command? You apparently don't have any answers to that question. That is indicative of, again, not responding to the seriousness of this issue. That says it all, Dr. Califf. It says it all. One last point I want to make. I've only learned this in the last 48 hours. 2014, Abbott deliberately and successfully tried to weaken bacteria testing safety standards. And I will credit FDA here. FDA issued a proposed rule that would have increased regular safety inspections of infant formula manufacturing facilities, and in the effort to prevent the contamination of infant formula. I believe it was Abbott. I think it may have been Gerber, and there may have been others who led the charge to weaken the inspection regime. Now, this is a company and a manufacturing entity that has a sole source contract. And that is what, but my question to you, I want to address that, but do you have a plan to increase inspections and testing at these facilities? And what is that plan?
As we, first of all, thank you again for the additional funding, but you know, the plan is to increase the inspections for the workforce that we have in a very orderly way, particularly in the Sturgis facility. Essentially, it's like a daily inspection. We're there with the Abbott people overseeing what they're doing. So we're in the plan. And as for the other U.S. facilities, you know, we'll have to get back to you on the specific number of times we'll inspect. but we will have a very orderly, specific inspection system. I would like to add the supply chain issues that we've all been talking about. We need to have access to the supply chain data, which we don't have. In other words, each company has its own supply chain. They handle it very carefully for their own needs. But if you ask the question, how do they all fit together? We don't have that information. And they can give it to us if they want, but we need to have the authority to get that. And let me just also acknowledge, I think you said it says it all. I am committed to get back to you with specifics about what happened. I'm just not prepared today to do it. I apologize for that.
Well, we have to change underlying, and I will end here because my colleagues have been indulgent with me here this morning. The fact that you are the regulatory agency and you do not, first of all, you do not have mandatory recall, and you do not have, you just said, access to data. Well, you ought to be up here demanding that we provide you with that kind of authority to get the information that you need in order to be able to do your job as a regulatory agency. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the ranking member and to my colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Laura. And at this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Valadeo for a second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Califf, I'd like to discuss the issue of feed additive approvals. As you know, new animal feed additives can offer meaningful environmental benefits in dairy and other ag production, reducing enteric methane emissions by as much as 30%. But FDA's current approval process treats these items as drugs, even though they move entirely through the animal's digestive tract. We included language in the fiscal year 2022 report to direct FDA to look at reviewing ingredient claims on environmental and other issues as foods, as we provided $1 million in new funding for the approvals in the final bill. Can you provide us an update with the work your agency is doing on this?
Yes, we're moving along well with that, and I'm fully aware that this is a big issue for the farming community, both on the animal side and also on the agriculture side. So we want to come to a resolution. So we are getting a good bit of research done about the safety and benefits of addition to food. And in not too long a period of time, we'll get back to you with specifics about that. It is something that we're working on.
Okay. No, it's something that obviously is important to a lot of folks, and it's come up quite a bit in especially my district. I've got one of the largest dairy districts in the country, and it is important. So look forward to hearing from you and talking to you more about this. And Mr. Chairman, I've asked all the questions I've got for the record right now. I think we'll submit anything else we got through the back for the record on the site. So appreciate the time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Valadeo. Ms. Underwood, you're now recognized for a second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a registered nurse, another priority that I'm focused on is protecting our nation's young people from the health risks of e-cigarette products. According to a 2021 survey data from CDC and FDA, more than 1 in 3 high school students and more than 1 in 10 middle school students reported that they have used tobacco products, and e-cigarettes were the most commonly used product. CDC and FDA researchers concluded that factors that might continue to promote tobacco product use among U.S. youth, such as the availability of flavors and access to tobacco products, remain prevalent in 2021. Let's be clear, the reason why flavored e-cigarettes have been and continue to be so accessible for young people is because of the FDA's unacceptable delays in reviewing pre-market tobacco product applications and the failure by your predecessor to meet the court-ordered review deadline of September 9th, 2021. While I've been pleased to see the marketing denial orders that you've announced since being confirmed, some of the most popular products among young people remain on the market. And just last week, FDA filed a status report in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland, in which the agency provided an estimation that application reviews will not be completed until June 30th, 2023. Dr. Califf, with more kids getting addicted to nicotine every day, can you provide an explanation of why FDA is projecting that reviews will not be completed until next June, nearly 2 years after the court-ordered review deadline?
Thanks for bringing attention to this issue. And, you know, as a cardiologist and someone very involved in medicine, et cetera, the addiction to nicotine is a very difficult problem. And there is no question that there was an industry that developed specifically to get teenagers addicted to nicotine, in which case, you know, the old statement that was uncovered in the tobacco industry, customers for life, because stopping vaping is extremely difficult to do. It's nothing I'd like more than to move these things along more quickly. But what we gave the court was an honest assessment, giving the number of people we have and the legal requirements we have to consider these applications. And I also want to emphasize, this is an industry that has amazing capabilities on the legal front. If we make one single error in process, we could be set back for years in these applications.
Yes, sir.
And then finally, I just want to add, we have consistently for the last, I don't know how many years, asked for user fees from the vaping industry. Right now, all of this work is entirely unfunded. We're doing it borrowing people from other parts of the FDA. And we have a request in for what I think is for such a prosperous industry, a very reasonable user fee arrangement. And I hope Congress will act on this.
Thank you. We know that tobacco products must have an FDA marketing order before coming to market, meaning that e-cigarette products without marketing orders are currently on the market illegally. And FDA has the authority to initiate enforcement actions to remove these products from the market. Will you commit to using this authority while FDA completes its review of the remaining pre-market tobacco product applications?
Well, I appreciate the sentiment, which I share to a great degree. But I know you're also aware that if we take action like that, we will end up with a lot of our legal force tied up in court. And so we're going to have to be very judicious the way we use that authority, because we want to reserve our abilities on the legal front to take care of the problems that we know will be lasting. So I want to come back to you and discuss that specifically to make sure that we at least have an understanding of what our capabilities are in that regard.
Right, but Dr. Califf, I mean, to say that we're going to wait another several months, over a year, to be able to take enforcement action is something that's just unconscionable given what we know is happening in the communities that we serve across this country. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Underwood. Thank you, Commissioner. I believe that we have exhausted the questions from the members, and I appreciate very much your availability, Commissioner Califf. We all understand how incredibly busy you are these days, and we appreciate your time. These issues are very, very, very important, though. And as I mentioned at the outset, FDA's work is vitally important to every American in order to keep them safe and healthy. And the challenges that we discussed today show just how crucial it is for the agency to be at peak performance with all hands on deck every single day. We want to help you in any way that we can to surmount these challenges. And with respect to the infant formula issue that we've been dealing with today, I want to just make sure that people know that we are not finished with this. We're going to dig down deep, and on May 25th next week, we're going to be dealing with the infant formula stakeholders that we'll hear from to get their perspective on what this crisis means and how we need to deal with it. But along with all that we've discussed, we will also forward additional questions to you for the record, and we look forward to your diligent and timely responses. Dr. Harris, do you have any closing remarks? If so, I will yield for you for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Califf, again, thanks for coming before the subcommittee. As we talked about, I think when we first met, you've got a tough job. I mean, the FDA is an agency with very broad regulatory authority in areas that are because of COVID and now because of the infant formula, quite controversial. So, good luck in doing it. Let us know in any ways we can help. And again, I just want to thank you for being willing to step up, being willing to head the agency, and good luck in the future. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Harris, and thank you to all of the members of the subcommittee in attendance, and thank you to our staff who put this hearing together. With that, this subcommittee hearing is adjourned.